Hello everyone, and welcome to the first Cloth Map Q&A session of 2018. That's right, the future. I am just having some tea here, courtesy of this mug my sister got me for Christmas. It changes color when you put warm water into it. So it goes from this nighttime map of the world to a daytime map of the world. Just add water. So it's a green tea with lemon and honey, which I've added after talking with Cloth Map patron Paris Aerosmith, which is not only one of the coolest names I've ever heard, but he is also an actor and a voice coach who offered his services to me with the aim of maybe helping me to improve the quality of the voiceovers with Cloth Map. So I didn't get, my voice didn't break or anything like that. So thank you, Paris. It's going well so far. I've been doing my face stretches and my tongue twisters, red lorry, yellow lorry, all that stuff. But let's get to the questions, shall we? That's what happens here at the Cloth Map Q&A. You ask me questions and I answer them. How about that? First question is from Nicholas Wandel. Did you see much of a change in your patron numbers with the recent fee-changing drama? Have the numbers rebounded since those plans were scrapped? So, in case you didn't hear about this, Patreon announced last month, December, that they were changing how their fees worked. So currently, before this announcement and after are the same because they rescinded this announcement and it's not happening. But what they were planning on doing is changing it from the way it works now, which is I pay, as the creator on Patreon, I pay all of the credit card fees. So when you, the patrons, are charged your monthly donation, there's a credit card fee associated with that you don't pay. You only pay as much as you put into the Patreon campaign. I pay, as the creator, I pay the credit card fees, and that's fine. That's the cost of doing business. But Patreon wanted to change it for a lot of hard to understand reasons. They wanted to change it so that you, the patron, paid the credit card fee. People were not happy about that. A lot of people canceled their pledges across Patreon, so Patreon rolled it back, and that change is not happening anymore. But, and while it's hard to tell exactly why people leave a Patreon campaign, although, there's a back end for Patreon where you can see how many patrons you've gained per month, how many you've lost, and there's also, when you leave a Patreon campaign, it will ask you why you left, and you can write in why. So using the narrow window where that announcement was made and when it was rescinded, and judging from people's exit interviews, as they're called, I estimate that Cloth Map lost around 100 patrons in that window. We've since gotten some back, and again, it's tough to tell whether everyone left because of that announcement, and how many we have still not recovered from. But the long and the short of it is December was the net worst month in 5 months for patrons. I mean, it's all degrees. It wasn't a huge blow. We're still fine. Everything's cool. Cloth Map's not going away. But it was a blow. But I think the thing is, I'm running a business here, and business things happen to businesses. You have to kind of anticipate the unanticipatable, expect the unexpected. So bad things come from any direction, and this is just one bad thing that impacted us. So it's tough because that's, Patreon is the only source of income that Cloth Map has currently. So it was a big blow, but not a devastating one. Thankfully, you are still with me, and thankfully ClothMap is in a position that not a lot of other creators are in to weather a storm like that. Not every Patreon creator bounced back, so I feel very fortunate. Second question comes from, oh boy, sorry about this, Max O. Siskowski. I'm going with Siskowski. Hey Drew, looking forward to the new year. Do you find it all getting hung up on the money that's coming through Patreon? Related question. Since the funding is so volatile and obviously from what we can see the monthly amount has gone down from when you first launched, is it a constant thought on your mind? If so, what do you do to prepare for that validity in funding? If not, what keeps you at bay knowing it can fluctuate so much? Hope your new year is going well. You too. Good question. First of all, I think as far as I understand it, that initial, what a lot of Patreon campaign, or what I think all Patreon campaigns experience is an initial spike when it's announced, right? And that's when you want to throw all of your marketing energy at the announcement to get that initial spike, and then it tapers. So it's just a matter of, can you spike it again, right? Or can you get it to slowly grow? So I'm currently in the taper phase, and it's reached sort of an equilibrium right now. It's not like it's not plummeting, but it is slowly tapering off. And that's, I mean, I don't prefer it to be that way, but it's not a cause for concern because what I've been focusing on, at least in the initial stage, the first year of ClothMap, was establishing a foundation of quality videos. Marketing to me, or at least putting the majority of my effort into growing monetarily, seemed to me to be putting the cart before the horse. Because if you don't have a solid product, then you're kind of polishing a turd. So I'm trying not to make a turd first, and instead make something nice. And then once I have something that I feel really good about marketing, to market it. And when I say marketing, it's really, to grow Patreon, you need to grow the top end of the funnel, right? The visibility of ClothMap across the internet, or across the world, or any way that people are going to come into ClothMap. So the way to do that is with visibility, and the way to grow visibility is with marketing, because the larger the initial pool is of people, the more people will filter down into becoming patrons. So the first year of ClothMap, or the first 2017, was really focused on getting the video part of it right. But now that we have a better understanding of what ClothMap is offering, and a better understanding of what it takes to produce that, now we can start spending time on, or now we can carve out time specifically for things like growing the project. So yeah, two goals with that: marketing, grow the funnel. I hate using business speak, but this is how I think of it. Grow the funnel, and then look for other sources of income. The key here is to not negatively impact what I'm already doing. So, ClothMap's not about to become like paid advertising or anything. And I think another part of that is not only getting additional sources of income, but also decreasing costs. So there's a lot of things in those realms that we're exploring. Christopher Blomqvist asks, hey, love the Brazil videos. They really improved on the already great Ukraine videos. Thank you. My question to you is, now that you've done this for a while, how are you handling working by yourself mostly and from home? Does it ever get lonely, boring, or hard to motivate yourself? I'd imagine it being kind of hard after working for so long with a close group of friends. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Giant Bomb was a close group of friends, and it was fun to go into work and have other people to bounce ideas off of and stuff. But I think the biggest change from Giant Bomb is the amount of really intensive editing that I'm doing. And editing is a really time and brain intensive process. So to enable me to get the most amount of editing work done in a day that I can, I've kind of had to experiment with a lot of daytime schedules. What I've settled on these days is it sounds bad or sounds insane. 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So 10 hours, but that's not an entire. I'm not working that whole time. There's a breakfast break, there's a lunch break, there's an exercise break. I personally can't edit for like 6 straight hours. I can do 3 maximum. So initially I work for 3 hours, take a break, and then maybe do 2 more hours, take a break, 1 more hour, take a break, and then it's time for administrative tasks like email and planning and stuff like that. And every day is different, but that's for an editing heavy day. That's getting six good hours of editing is good. So that's I guess how I keep myself on task and to make sure that I'm getting enough done so that at the end of the day I feel like I've accomplished something. But since I do work from home, it does feel like I'm in my own little world. It's not lonely necessarily. I have a group of close friends, and I talk with my family a lot. It feels sometimes though when you when you don't leave your house for a few days, you feel kind of out of touch with reality a little bit, or with the world. So I try to at least go outside once a day, whether that means on a run or just out for a walk, or something, to feel like I'm not a recluse, some cave dweller. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Cody Armature says, "Hey Drew, how are the flying lessons going? Has that process been what you expected it to be?" Has it been what I expect? I think yes. From what I gathered before I started flying, a lot of people told me it's going to take a long time and you're going to have to do it regularly, because the thing with flying is there's a lot of technical knowledge that you need, but also a lot of physical knowledge, I guess. Not hand-eye coordination, what am I looking for? Muscle memory, feeling the plane, that kind of stuff. And if you go too long without lessons, you forget that stuff and have to relearn it, and thus the process takes much longer. So it's tricky to keep up that regularity. And so lately I haven't. Brazil, I kind of put flying on pause to really focus on Brazil and nail it, because I knew it was the second cloth map project, and it was really important to me to get the stuff out, the videos from Brazil out in a good amount of time, not like Ukraine that took a long time to turn around. So I really buckled down and focused on that. So flying kind of took a back seat. I haven't been flying since I started planning for Brazil. So it's been a few months. That said, I feel really good about how Brazil went from a production standpoint. And I think now, I mean, the more trips happen, the better we're gonna get at doing them. So the more time I will have to, or the more I'll I'll be able to predict what kind of time I have. And with that ability comes the ability to get back into something like flying lessons. So yeah, 2018, back into it. Benjamin Glover asks, in all caps, have you finished Final Fantasy VI yet? I will answer in all caps, nope. John Seminario says, Drew, looking forward to catching up on the Brazil videos I've missed now that I've got some free time. While you and others at Giant Bomb have always been good about interacting with the community, I imagine the nature of Patreon means there's a much more direct line of communication between you and the people watching and supporting you. Does this affect the way you think about your work at all? Do you ever feel more pressured to deliver on something because of how direct a line of communication between you and your viewers is? ClothMap has been great thus far, and I'm excited to see where the year takes you. Thanks, John. It's funny, the line of communication thing, in terms of directness, it feels about the same, honestly. And I think that's a testament more to Giant Bomb than a reflection of how Patreon works. Giant Bomb, we felt very connected with our community via Twitter and live stream chats and comments and forums and stuff. I was always reading that stuff, you know, not just for the vanity aspects of like, oh, how many comments did this get? But I think it's really important to, no matter what you're doing, if you have an audience, to take the temperature of that audience as often as possible, just to, not to be reactive to it necessarily, but just to understand it. But I think the big change from Giant Bomb to Patreon in terms of community has been the fact that, you know, Giant Bomb was supported by subscribers, just like I am now with Patreon, but only partially, right? Because Giant Bomb was owned by CBS, so there was always kind of that safety net there, which kind of enabled us to try things in a way that is difficult on Patreon. So Giant Bomb, we could just kind of have an idea, make a video and throw it out there. And if it landed, great. But if it didn't land, it was okay because, you know, we were still all right. CBS had our back. But with Patreon, I am hyper aware of doing something that may disappoint my patrons, right? Because you are my lifeline. That doesn't mean, though, that as a creator on Patreon, that you should be hyper reactive to your community. I think there's a healthy balance. You have to assign the proper weight to things like comments, view counts, turnover numbers, and those exit interviews I was talking about, with your own goals. So I think at the end of the day, you have to it sounds so corny, be true to yourself. But you have to have some kind of core idea of the project and what that is. And yes, feedback can change things about that, but you can't be driven totally by feedback. Otherwise, your project will become the average of everyone. So listen to the opinions of the people that matter, which are you, the patrons. And then use this sort of seat of your pants thing to change or to not change your project. Nicholas Major asks, noticed you switched from the A7S to the GH4/5. What was the reason for the switch? He's talking about cameras. I have the honor of building a studio for a company I do video side work with, and I loved my Sony A7S, so I had them get the Mark II. Now I see everyone on the GH4/5S, or GH4/5s. I know the pros and cons of each, but I want to know from your point of view. Also, if I can steal a second question, what have you been up to in terms of other work? I'll answer that one first. I don't really know what that means. ClothMap is my only work. I don't do freelance stuff or anything. So nothing, I guess. In terms of cameras, though, we used Joey's GH5 in Brazil for a few reasons. Number one, he was more comfortable with it. But number two, he showed me some test footage of, so the camera has two ways of stabilizing the footage in the camera before, not digitally, like physically stabilizes the camera, or stabilizes the image. And the test footage he showed me was him walking and filming, and it looked amazingly stable. I had gotten some comments from Ukraine about the footage looking shaky, and I kind of agreed. So I encouraged Joey to bring the GH5 to Brazil and shoot with that. The cool thing about that was not only does it have really good stabilization, but it also has good slow motion. The A7S does slow motion as well, but coupled with the stabilization, you can get things like shooting from a car, which with the A7S, I was never able to do very effectively. So that stuff has been really useful in the Brazil videos. I'm sure if you've seen any of those, you can recognize a lot of the slow motion stuff shot from the cars. If you're in a studio though, and they're going to be on tripods, I don't know that that advantage necessarily helps you. The other thing about the GH5 is that it's much lighter than the A7, especially with that gigantic lens I have. So that was really useful for us in our run and gun operation to have a lighter camera. But again, in a studio, I'm not really sure that matters. Yeah, so there you go. Jesse Foster asks, any plans to go to Japan? I know that's an obvious destination, but I would love to see a Japan series. Absolutely. I think it's a no-brainer that ClothMap eventually goes to Japan. But Japan is special. So I really want to make sure that I do Japan justice and really, really nail it. So Japan's one that's going to take a lot of planning. And I want to make sure that I've got the production side of things down, and it doesn't just turn into a gigantic monster of a project. So I want to do Japan right, is basically what I'm saying. But I think there might also be, because it's so rich in ClothMap style subjects, I think there might be occasion to maybe tack on a quick trip to Japan if I'm already in the area. So that's also an option I have open. But I think just because we do one little trip in Japan doesn't mean that the big Japan trip is not going to happen. So yeah, I want to do a big Japan trip, but I don't really know when yet. Last question here from Margaret Tyre. Hi Drew, I'm a pre-medical student, so I was wondering, what sort of health-related things do you consider before going on your trips? Do you think or plan beforehand what to do if, God forbid, you need to access medical care in a different country? Thanks for all you do, smiley face. Thanks, Margaret. Good question. First of all, I make sure I'm up on all my shots, so I compare my immunization record with what the CDC recommends for each country. They have like a list of, type in a country here and here's what you should be immunized for. So I make sure I'm all topped up on that stuff. There's a travel clinic in San Francisco that's pretty easy to just go in and get the shots you need. And in country, I try to be, the big one is water. So if there's any doubt, I try to buy bottled water as much as possible. Just because that can, like a stomach bug can really lay you out and totally disrupt especially something like cloth map that, you know, we have shooting days, we have times we need to hit. So that would be real rough. And then that also extends to things that are washed with water. So for example, lettuce or salads, if that stuff's, or really kind of any vegetable, if it's not boiled in a stew or something, that could be cause for concern because it may have been washed with water. You don't know. Again, I think when I'm on a cloth map trip, I tend to be a little more draconian about that stuff than when I'm on a personal trip because, like, I don't know, when I'm in Vietnam, I want to eat the street food, you know, on vacation. But if I was in Vietnam for cloth map, it's, all right, I'll eat the street food if it's boiled because I really have to hit this shoot tomorrow. So that's that. As far as medical care goes, I have my regular health insurance in the US, but I also have an international traveler's health insurance from a company called GeoBlue. So they'll cover things like, you know, if you have to go see a doctor, if you have to go to a hospital, or even if you have to be evacuated, they'll help out with that stuff. And they can also just, you can call them and say, you know, can you suggest a reputable doctor in this country, that kind of thing. They also have a cool app that will detect where you are in the world and alert you to any potential things like, oh, there's an outbreak of this in this area, or there's social unrest, be careful. So that's helpful. But I did want to point out something from a document that they sent me. Note, injuries and illnesses resulting from terrorism and pandemics are covered as any other injury or illness, provided all the following conditions are met. Number 1, the covered person had no direct or indirect involvement in the terrorist activity. Number 2, the terrorist activity or pandemic is not in a country or location where the United States has issued a travel warning that has been in effect within the 3 months prior to the covered person's date of arrival. And number 3, the covered person has not unreasonably failed or refused to depart a country or location following the date a warning to leave that country or location is issued by the United States government. So, some caveats, but it's a nice safety net to have. I thankfully haven't, knock on wood, had to use it yet. But it's nice knowing it's there. So, and it's not that expensive. So if you are traveling a lot, or if you would just like to know, have some kind of recourse if something does happen, yeah, check it out, GeoBlue. And that's it. Just kidding. It was not the last question. We have a few latecomers here. Ravi Sankarlal says, hopefully I'm not too late, but my question is, during all your traveling, have you been able to keep up with your meditation practice at all, or no? Ever since you and Dan at Giant Bomb talked about it on the Bombcast, I've adopted the practice as well, and I'm currently on a 300-day consistency streak with it, and it has made such a positive impact for me that I can't thank you enough can't thank you all enough for introducing it on the Bombcast. Wow, that is quite a streak. Congratulations. Yeah, that's great. Yes, to answer your question, I am still keeping up with the meditation practice. It's tougher to do on trips, but I try to do it every day, no matter where I am. On trips, and I guess at home as well, I try to do it as soon as I wake up. So at home, I'll have a coffee first and then read a little bit from a rotating cast of meditation books, and then sit down to meditate for 20 minutes or so. When I'm traveling, though, I don't bring the books, but I do try to do it as soon as I get up. Sometimes, like, just I sit up in bed to do it, because I know that as soon as I get out of it, then, you know, I'll be off and running. If I can't do it, if I have like an early wake up or something, I'll try to do it at the end of the day, even if it's just for like 60 seconds or something. Again, I'm not perfect. I certainly do not have a 300-day consistency streak. It's, meditations, it's nice because you can always jump back on the wagon if you haven't done it in a while. And the paradox is, at the times that you really, at least for me, at the times that I really need it is when it's the hardest to do, when I have the most to do, or when I'm on a trip or something. So I really try to do it, and I think making it the first priority in the day is really key. Second question here from Ricky Pilgrim. Ricky Pilgrim, another great name. Hey Drew, I was a big fan of yours at Giant Bomb, but I was only tangentially aware of what cloth map was until yesterday when I watched the Brazil series. Needless to say, I immediately hopped onto Patreon after watching one of your videos. Wow. This project is amazing and the content you're producing is beyond fantastic, so thank you for doing this. Thank you. That makes me feel really good. I don't know if this has been asked or discussed before, as I'm not entirely caught up on the content yet, but what kind of preparation do you do with respect to communication while traveling? Obviously, the internet is a great source, but I've heard of people going as far as to find a local restaurant in their hometown that serves food from the destination country and just eating and talking to people as a way to learn the basics of the language. I've never done that. That's great. I noticed the flashcards on your Ukraine travelogue. Do you learn on the internet for keywords and phrases, or do you seek out people who know the language / culture to help you be better prepared? Thanks. First of all, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you. And to answer your question, I have a list of phrases. I try to keep the language overhead small and digestible so that it's doable. Because for me, the hardest part is recall, is coming up with the right word or phrase at the right time. Sometimes you only have like a second to remember excuse me or thank you or something. So I have my own personal list that I've kind of honed over the years, and it's 10 phrases. There's like 10 must-know phrases, and then like a handful of maybe another 10 or dozen or so of helpful phrases that, depending on the country or the situation, I have it prepared there so that I can refer to it. But the 10 phrases are the ones that I really, really want to memorize and be able to recall correctly. So those are hello. And this, I guess, kind of extends to 1A, B, and C for a lot of languages have good morning, good day, good evening, good night, that kind of thing. But number 1 is hello. Number 2 is excuse me, to get attention. And it's funny, you would think that excuse me is one item on here, but it's really 2. There's excuse me to get attention, and there's excuse me for an apology. In English, you can use the same phrase for 2 different things, but in other languages, they're different sentiments completely. So, so to get someone's attention, like a waiter or something, or you just walk up to somebody and you have a question for them. Often I'll say the word for excuse me and then English. With all these, it's not about getting what you want or being understood necessarily, although a lot of them do help with that. Charades helps with getting what you want and accomplishing stuff. But these phrases are really to initiate conversation, because I've found that even if you don't speak a language, making the effort is what really matters to people. So coming up to someone, saying hello in their native language and excuse me, and then going English, that's enough to get them to get across that, like, I'm trying, please meet me halfway. So I would say hello and excuse me to get attention are 1 and 2. Then we've got number 3 is excuse me for apology. Number 4 is thank you, also very important. I don't understand which can clear things up. If like, a taxi driver is just, throwing a string of words at you, you say, apology, I don't understand. Yes is number 6. Nice to meet you. Not totally required, but if you can throw a nice to meet you in their normal language, that's big points. Toilet is number 8, and number 9 is water. In the US, when you're at a restaurant, you're almost always given water, no questions asked. California is a little different nowadays because we've had so many droughts, but generally that's how it goes. In a lot of other countries I've been to, water is not a given, so you have to ask for it. And number 10 is also when you're wandering around a lot all day, you get pretty parched, so water is key. And number 10 is and, which seems like a weird one, but pointing and doing charades and stuff is helped a lot by knowing the word for and. So you can say this and this, like point and point. So that's my 10 phrases. Hello, excuse me to get attention, excuse me for apology, thank you, I don't understand, yes, nice to meet you, toilet, water, and. I also have, so I have that written down in a document that I can just refer to whenever I'm in the country, but I've also developed my own phonetic writing system that might make sense only to me, but that's all it really needs to make sense to. It's hard to, if you write it down in the language itself, it's tough to, you would have to also remember how the language works phonetically. So I just blitz that and rewrite it in my own phonetic way. For pronunciation, I go to YouTube first, and then there's a handful of other sites. Omniglot, I think, has some a lot of those phrases. They'll have like a little wave file that you can just click and play. Wiki Travel has a phonetic system actually really close to mine. And Wiki Travel is also really helpful with signage. They'll show you what like bathroom looks like, so you can draw it, or not draw it. You can copy it and paste it. Google Docs has support for a lot of languages, so you shouldn't have to draw it. But that's really key too. Although most countries these days have like international signage, so that's not too big of a deal. They have like bathroom, men, women, that is a big deal. Open, close, for like if a shop is open or closed, that's really helpful. But again, those are sort of on the periphery. The 10 phrases are the ones that I try to memorize. So yeah, I think that's it. Last questions. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll see you next time.